Characters can be super impactful and bring a lot of life to 3D art. However, the process of creating a character can be a very daunting task and it's easy to get wrong. I'm going to walk you through my entire character creation process, sketch to render. This video is a lot more about theory and pipeline than it is an actual demonstrative tutorial on specific steps. Let's do it! My name is Elijah Sheffield. I go by Sweet Boy Motion on the internet. I make content geared towards people learning or using Blender to create stylized art. So be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any gems of wisdom that I possess. Now, my process for character creation and animation is by no means the industry standard, especially when put up against something like Disney or a AAA game studio. I'm a one-man show, and I have to be able to do everything in the character pipeline and do it pretty quickly. So this tutorial is not the fire-tested production pipeline of Pixar, but it's done me well so far and works really great for armies of one trying to integrate characters into their motion design. Now let's start with the very beginning, design. For most characters, you need to start with some sort of source material. Sometimes a client hands you concept art, sometimes it's entirely up to you to make design decisions. In any case, you need to consider three things when starting a character. How close up will I be on my character? How elaborate and acrobatic does it need to be? And how much time do I have to actually create him? The answers to these three questions will help you make responsible, informed design decisions. If you'll never see it on the character, don't make it. If the character has to move weird, consider that action. If the client wants the character quickly, keep it lean and really cheap. Adapt your work to the problems presented, and think of the design phase as just one big puzzle. Once you have the initial concepts, it can be super helpful to pull in references. For this suit of armor in particular, I looked up historically accurate armor sets, high fantasy costumes, but what I found to be most enlightening were a bunch of TikToks of people doing cosplay armor. They're super unique and super creative. So gather all your treasure trove of ideas and dump them into some kind of image bank. Pinterest works, Photoshop works, but personally, I like to use something called PureRef. It works amazing and it's super easy to use, just download it and try it. So now armed with references and technical direction, we'll need a layout to be able to reference as we start to build our model. Now if you're handed layouts, yee-haw, keep that client forever. However, if you're just given general direction or you're doing your own thing, you'll need to draw your own layouts. This can be a really quick sketch of an A pose of your character from the front and the side. At this point, we can also include sketches of any props that we might have or initial concepts of what the scene might actually look like. Now, once we have our sketches, we can bring those references into Blender and use them as a background to model against. And that brings us to our second step, modeling. At this phase, a lot of folks just want to jump right into sculpting. And I can't blame you, sculpting is fun. But here's the thing, don't start sculpting until you absolutely have to. If you're doing really organic shapes, like a character's head or something, you're going to need to sculpt at some point. But I've seen a lot of beginners in Blender, or even ZBrush for that matter, go straight into sculpting without spending much time on their base mesh. Now, if you're an expert sculptor, go for it. But if you start sculpting on a busted base model, you're going to get busted results. So start with big shapes and keep it super modular. Oftentimes, depending on the character or the scope of the project, you don't really even need to sculpt. Especially in the game of balancing speed and quality, you can reuse assets like heads and hands, removing the need to sculpt a base mesh every single time. I'll usually start by box modeling a super low poly character with subdivisions turned on, just keeping it lean and easy to adjust. And once I'm happy with the way it's looking, I'll drop the subdivisions to 1 and apply the modifier so that I have a lot more geometry to rig with. Once the character's modeled, I hike up my big boy pants and I start the UVing process. I'll usually do this in tandem with up-resing my model so that there's a bit more structure to the process. I like to start by creating a UV checker material just so I can see what I'm doing. You can do this easily by just generating a UV image right in Blender and plugging it into the BSDF, and then you can actually see what's happening on your model. Another thing that helps speed up the UVing process is assigning a hotkey to marking seams. It's much faster and more convenient than having to right-click and go all the way down to mark seam every single time. As I'm unwrapping, if I see these big ugly warps in my texture, I'll go to my UV panel and drop down under Overlay and tick on UV Stretch. And now I can just see what edges are causing this stretch. Once I've chopped it all up, I'll go ahead and package all of my UVs into groups. If it's going to Substance Painter, I'll actually spend some time massaging my UV layouts, but otherwise, I just kind of cut corners and make sure they're all the same relative scale. Our next step is texturing. Now I know plenty of folks that rig and then texture or even animate before texturing. That's a totally fine approach and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm greedy and I like to see how pretty it's going to be right now. Get that hit of dopamine early on. But also, texturing first can give me a more educated approach to my rig. If the rig is deforming the texture, I can tell really easily. If the textures just aren't working with the way my character moves, I can adjust the rig. It's just another step to help me make informed design decisions. Now, if we did our homework up front, we'll know exactly what our character should look like and we can just start throwing materials on there. Now, sometimes I'll create procedural materials in Blender shader nodes. You can get some really beautiful stylized results from that. But I also love Grayscale Gorilla's Studio Hub. You can hook it up straight to Blender and send over phenomenal materials with just the click of a button. I have no affiliation with them, but I cannot recommend their product enough to any 3D designer. It's just so convenient. And finally, rigging. Everybody's least favorite task. But it doesn't have to be all bad. A lot of Blender folks like to use Rigify. It's easy to use, it's pretty powerful, it's built right into Blender. But personally, in my own work, I use AutoRig Pro. It's like $50 on the Blender market. But the smart rigging features and the skinning methods are so simple and user-friendly, it's worth every dime. I'll link it below in the description. There are plenty of tutorials out there for ARP or whatever rigging tool you're using, so I won't spend too much time detailing those out right now. This is a pipeline video after all, not a rigging tutorial. So once you have your rig, skinned your character, you've painted weights, you've missed out on sleep and joy, you're now ready to test him out. So grab that son of a gun and push him to his limits. Animating with a broken rig is less fun than rigging, so don't punish future you and spend some time to get the rig right. If the rig is fireproof, you're ready to animate it. And that's about it. Following this pipeline, you should have a fully functional character ready to animate or pose out. This is in no way the definitive or even right way to make a character, but it's the way that I make them and it's been working out so far. If you're new to character creation or just looking for a way to incorporate more character into your motion design work, this is a really approachable pipeline to start with. Having a full overview of my process opened many doors and closed very little of them. So feel free to tell me what you'd like to know more about in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm putting out content like this every single week. Thanks for watching.